Greetings. My name is Stan, and this online teaching program called What It Takes will take about 50 minutes. About the time usually for a session of therapy. Now, this is not therapy. Hopefully it's teaching, hopefully it's coaching, a little bit of mentoring. Perhaps it will start what I really want, a rather engaged and perhaps enthusiastic conversation that might be much better than any therapy. As one of my friends who is a therapist said, you know what, Stan? Most of my clients and patients, they don't need me. It's just they take $150 to buy a good friend. Well, I'd hope that we, for much cheaper than that, will become good friends in a conversation that could literally change our life and our business in some significant way if we take it seriously. Now, what has engaged me right now is something that I have been involved in for a good deal of my life as a teacher, as an online teacher, as a broadcaster, as a business performance coach. And that has been the fact that really, we have no good, consistent way to take young men and women and help them be truly successful in their life and business. That won't happen in college. It won't happen in graduate school. And as I oftentimes say, the problem with an MBA is that mostly bad advice about how to live your life. Now, a few years ago, I was engaged to help the financial services industry develop a mentoring program. And we spent a lot of time and energy. I even wrote a book called Having Conversations That Count: Performance Mentoring for Financial Advisors. It's a nice little book. There was only one problem with it. Hardly anybody ever read it. You see, they just weren't interested in mentoring younger men and women. Just didn't happen. 3 or 4 or 5 attempts, never happened. Well, you know what? Let's try one more time because it's more vital than ever today. Hence the name of my program, You're Fired. And go with my blessing. How to coach, mentor, apprentice entrepreneurs in the age of Trump. That's right. That's vital. As most of you may know, our President of the United States, Donald Trump, had a signature statement that goes back to his television and business days, and it was very simply when somebody did not perform, they did not meet expectations, he would say to them, "You're fired. You're fired." And that was Donald Trump. Many of you who may know me know that I also have a number of signature statements, and one of my most significant one is simply this: always close with a benediction. Always close with a benediction. So what I'm hoping to do is that we will find a way, a significant way, to put Donald Trump and some of his insights about life and business with some of the things that I have learned and some of the things you have learned and have taught me, so perhaps we could begin to talk about how are we going to help men and women today, young men and women today, succeed in their life and business, and in doing so, they help our life and our business. In fact, they may be, as Donald Trump tried to make happen and successfully did, that literally his family, his children are the ones who he gives the business to. And if not his children, to those he cares deeply about. Wouldn't it be nice if your business was not only a business that lasted, but it's a business that served your family and served your children as well as your clients and your friends, and perhaps in a very good way funded your life retirement? Interested in any of those things? I hope you are, because what I want to do today is to put those themes together, and I've done the job right. At least you're interested in continuing. Indeed, what I want you to know is that we need to think about, you're fired, and go with my blessings. How do we coach, mentor, teach apprentice entrepreneurs in the age that is before us, which might be so perhaps the age of Trump, who, interestingly enough, is probably the first real entrepreneur in some respect to gain the political office, the highest political office in the land and indeed much of the world. And incredibly so, the man has no political experience. How did that happen? And what can we learn? It doesn't matter whether you like him or not. Successful men and women can learn from anybody and anything. Everything can be useful to you. And so what I'd like to do is, as we begin this time together, ask you to think about, how do we coach, teach, and mentor young men and women to be successful in their life and business, and perhaps carry on the succession plan of our business? I think we can help you. Let's see if it works. If not, you're free to fire me, and I'll go, and I'll bless you. Let's go. Thank you. You came back. 7 minutes. Now we're trying for about 10. One of the things I teach people, as I've taught people how to do radio and television all around the world, and that's vital for you if you're going to live and do business in the 21st century, is I would say is you're always trying to keep them for another 5 to 7 minutes. Remember, they've got that on and off switch, and if you aren't engaging, they will leave. That's a fundamental principle of life and business today. They can leave. They don't have to listen to you. They can turn you off. They can always find somebody else that they can do business with. And so we tried to, in 5 to 7 minutes, get you at least engaged enough to say, maybe I'll listen to episode 2. Well, here we go. Episode 2. You need to know that before any successful relationship, transaction, or sale really begins of any value, or of any way that significant things are involved, is it starts with two people whose stories meet. My story and your story. As one of my sales managers many years ago, a very wise man, a wise man of the Spirit, he had actually been a minister and then became extremely successful in the life insurance business. And he said this, he said, I always seek to bless my people first. And then I talk to them, and I don't want to find the facts. I want to find their story. And then hopefully my story and their story will meet. And in that overlap, we might find some way that I can help them. And he said, remember, I didn't say sell them. I meant help them. And since I went into it that way, it turns out that I, who was not a very good salesman, became the best in my company because of that. So I used to say on late night radio, let that sit on your head for a while, and that's part of my story. I've been a teacher, been a broadcaster, a business performance coach for many years, and I'm continuing on to do that. And as you will discover, I'm old school. I really am. Quite old-fashioned. A very powerful and well-known commentator in America, a man named Bill O'Reilly, one of the top-rated television personalities, has just written a book called, Old School. Because he is. I'm old-fashioned. I admit it. I'm even having a little bit of a problem here because, my wife and other people say, Stan, loosen up a bit, take off the tie. And there's something about that which I find a little bit difficult because, first of all, I like ties. I've got a bunch of beautiful ones. And I remember one of my friends in the discussion with a lot of young people as to how you should dress, particularly in the business world today. And he just kind of shook his head and said, well, I understand, but all I can say is I never lost a sale because I was wearing a coat and tie. And you know what? I think that's probably true. So you have to understand, that's who I am. I'm old school. I'm also a profound coach and mentor who would say this, is we are not human beings having a spiritual experience from time to time. We are spiritual beings having a human experience. And what all of that means is if you want to coach and mentor somebody, it has to be a place and a space and a person where your stories and beliefs and aspirations kind of begin to mix and come together. And remember, this is how it was done. The way business was done for years was you didn't send some kid off to an expensive $50,000 a year college, and they didn't get bachelor's degrees, and they didn't get MBAs. They were apprenticed. They were apprenticed. They were put in a business situation, oftentimes with a friend or colleague, and that's how they learned. And I believe that is still the very, very best way. I can still look back and know that a lot of my success was due to a gentleman named Charles Helms who met me as a young man, and he was going to try and make me into a J.C. Penney man. It didn't work. That's not what I wanted, but to this very day, some 50 years later, I tell you that my life was profoundly changed by Charles Helms, who took a young, awkward man and taught him how to sell and how to retail and how to manage and how to meet people and how to deal with difficult circumstances. And when I applied for another job, I simply said to the man, I was mentored by a man named J.C. Penney, good friend Charles Helm. And the man looked at me and said, when can you start? We need to understand that deep thing that successful young men and women do not get there because they went to college or university. It's because somebody apprenticed and mentored them. Please understand that. So that's the first thing we have to learn. This is vital, life-changing stuff. It is personal, it is relational, it is spiritual, it's emotional. It's what truly changes lives and changes the world, and it can change our business. Now, with that in mind, I want to just take the remaining 3 minutes of this particular session to introduce you to another mentor who changed my life. And here was his simple teaching. He said this, Stan, would you like to be one of the 3%? And I said, what does that mean? And here was his teaching. Stan, here's what we've discovered. Only 3% of the population knows who they are, what they want, where they're going, and they're trying to design a way to get there. Only 3%. 10% of the population, here's what is true. They have some thoughts and plans and goals, and they're pretty focused, but it's not nearly quite as focused as the 3%. It's a bit fuzzy on the edge, but these are people with strong intentions and directions. I said, 3%? 10%? Yeah. 60% of the population has hopes, wants, wishes, and some dreams. That's there. What's their plan for retirement? They're going to win the lottery. They deal with the day, and they have some thoughts and ideas, but nothing is clear, nothing possesses them, nothing obsesses them, nothing is deeply in love with them in terms of how they're going to live their lives. And they kind of deal with the day and live mostly by accident rather than by intention. And then he said, Stan, 27% of the population is clueless, and the number is growing. No hopes, no dreams, no plans, no goals. They just kind of go from day to day. He said, Stan, which of those do you want to be? A 3%er, a 10%er, a 60%er, a 27%er. Now, your first job is to find clients and colleagues and yourself in that 3% category. Now, I could go on in greater detail. In fact, in the whole big class, we'll talk a lot about what it means to be a 3%er. I just got a note from a pastor who is extremely successful in his work and ministry, and he said, "Thank you, Stan. 25 years ago, you taught me about the 3%, and I am one. Thank you. Bless you." Now, your job is to understand the power of being one of the 3%. And then how do I take that lifestyle, that business style, and how do I place it into the lives of young men and women so they may become a 3%er and attract 3%ers both as clients and colleagues, and they will teach our clients and our colleagues and their family and their relationships by their life and by their teaching and by their service the power of being one of the 3%. Did you write that down? 3, 10, 60, 27. What are you? What would you like to be? And can you, right now, make a commitment? The time is up. Did you hear it ring? Because the time is up, and the time is for you to now decide that you're going to be one of the 3%. Well, thank you for coming back. You haven't fired me yet. I'm grateful. Now, let's deal with that briefly. You see, a lot of people responded very negatively to "you're fired." Well, let me tell you something. You're fired is the way life is. First of all, you got to get fired up. If you're going to be successful, you have to be strongly, emotionally ignited. You have to be fired up. And so you better fire yourself up, or you know what? You'll probably get fired. And what fired meant is very simply this, is fairly or not, kindly or not, rightly or not, you didn't meet somebody else's expectations. They didn't find you useful. My daughter, who learned a lot from me and I learned a lot from her, went off to New York City to seek her fortune. You know, she was a writer and editor, and she said, "You know what, I'm going to leave Minneapolis and that's where I could be successful, but I want to go to New York, because if you can make it in New York, you can make it anywhere." And so off she went. And she has become very successful. But she also wrote a book about what it takes for a young person to be successful. And you know what the title of her book is? How to Be Useful. And what she discovered was everything she had been taught about success in university and college and everything was wrong. Oh, be smart, be clever, she said, no. What turns out is that I had to be useful to somebody else. Whether it was my boss, my senior editor, my client or colleague, I was only going to get compensated if I was useful to somebody. And I had to discover how to deal with all of the politics and all the shenanigans and how all of the stuff that goes on there and be useful. Because if I wasn't useful, I was going to get fired. And I was going to have to then figure out how I could be more useful for somebody else. I hope you teach that. That's old school stuff. How can you be useful? Now, with that in mind, I want to try to be useful to you. And one of the things that one of the friends who actually did read this book said, he said, "Stan, your coaching and mentoring model is a great sales model. What you just taught me about mentoring and teaching and coaching young people is the very same thing that I can use in my sales and marketing. So here's where we go. Many people have said, Stan, I don't know how to begin to coach and mentor. Well, now I'm going to teach you how to do that. I'm going to be useful to you. Any significant conversation that counts, whether it's with a client for a big sale, for a young mentoree who wants to succeed and go on and be useful, has these 5 stages. All right? And I want you to write them down. These are the 5 stages of an incredibly important coaching, sales, marketing, persuading, loving, engaging, creative conversation that'll count. You begin with an affirmation. As I tell people, the most important thing for you to understand that everybody in the world is wearing a sign and it says, please tell me I'm important. It's the secret sign. Everybody, the CEO, the kid at the checkout counter, they're all wearing a sign that says, please tell me I'm important. Everybody wants to be affirmed. They want to believe they matter, that they're important, that something good and God-given and graced is true of them. Where do you think that idea came from? It's because we are made and created in the image of God. And we think we have value, and they do have value. So I tell people this: treat every person you meet as the most important person in the world. Start that today. Everybody. That's right. Treat every person you meet as the most important person in the world. You figure out how to speak and say and live an affirmation. I've heard good things about you. I'm so glad that you gave me time. How nice of you to do this. I'm going to let you be creative enough to figure out how you can be kind and affirming to another. I've got lots of ideas, but you'll have to pay extra for that. But you figure out how to do an affirmation. All right? Then the conversation moves to what I call attention. So it's affirmation, now it's attention. Be fully there. As someone once taught me, be fully present, be fully there, and no place else. Don't be texting, don't be doing any other thing, be fully there. Be fully present. Yes, I even stand when a woman comes to the table because I'm old school, but I'm going to affirm her, greet her, and give her my full attention. And by the way, I'll probably do it for you as a gentleman too. But particularly for the ladies. That's just who I am. But I want to listen. Tell me your story. Don't sit down with a piece of paper and write out the facts. Listen powerfully. Find out what the issue is, what we are going to try to do in this. So in this conversation, I'm trying to be fully attentive to discover what we need to talk about in this coaching conversation or this sales conversation or this mentoring moment. Affirmation slides into attention. And now, after we do that, we've got something that we're going to do. So after I have affirmation, I have attention. Now let's get down to it, right? Let's concentrate. Concentration. Let's make this conversation about the primary issue of the moment. What are we trying to solve? What are we trying to achieve? What are we seeking to learn? What kind of an experience are we trying to have? This is the core of the conversation. We are, again, fully there and fully focused on exchanging learning, teaching experiences and stories that deal with the moment, with the right now that will lead us to a better future and future behavior. We're trying to help men and women deal with their attitudes and their behavior so that they can get better both attitudinally in their behavior and thereby in their relationships. And if you get those three together, attitude, behavior, and relationships, you'll probably be very successful. What do we need to get better at? And it could be everything from you need to change your voice, you need to dress differently, you need to say this, you need to pay it, whatever it might be. So the third stage in a coaching, mentoring conversation is, and by the way, Donald Trump is very big for detail. People have said that, he may come across boisterous and bluffing, and he probably is, but that's not the point. The point is, people who meet him tend to like him. There is that attention, that concentration. All right? Wow, you got that now. Okay, let's review. By the way, rule of 7. You have to hear something 7 times before you really have it go from your head to your heart to your gut. Affirmation, attention, concentration. Now, perhaps you can give them some direction. Now, there is a whole other class on how to give people direction, but that's extra. But this is where together we decide what we're going to do, where we're going to go, what we're going to hold people accountable and responsible for. And by the way, I don't try and use the word accountable very often. So, can I hold you accountable? Oftentimes I say is, can I hold you responsible for that? I'm here to help your responsibility, your ability to respond. I'm not just holding you accountable. Together we're going to work together so that you are more able to respond, more responsible. When are we going to get that done? What will it look like? What's your commitment to that? What's the goal? How are we going to do that? Okay, there we go. Now do you see how we're moving along? And what we're doing now is coming to things where the conversation is going to lead to some commitment, and hopefully the commitment is going to lead to some action, and the action will be in terms of our behavior, and our behavior will actually lead to a result. Something will change. Something will be different. And that's fundamental. We're changing things. Things are going to be different. We're going to create things. One of my easiest coaching questions is, how do you want your life to be different? Oh! Well, how can we make it different? Can we discover what to do? Can we then design a way to do it? And then can we do it? And can we do it again? So, here we go. We come to a decision based on the directions that we have decided upon. Hopefully it's gone well, but it might not have. We might decide, we might discover that this isn't working. This mentoring relationship or this mentoring conversation, it's not there. That happens. By the way, you will discover, if you're bold and you have a brave heart, that when you mentor others, you will be, in many cases, disappointed, and in some cases, you will even be betrayed. Count on it. That's okay. That's life. The great ones learn how to deal with it and love the world and love others anyhow. And so, whether it was bad or good, you close with a benediction. That's right. Now, I'm not talking about a religious service. The word benediction simply means this. Bene, which is kind of the Latin for good. Diction, to speak. A benediction is to speak good to another. Always close with a benediction. Now, It could be as lame as have a nice day, but I would ask you to be a little more creative. All the best and blessings to you. May it go well for you. Remember Spock from Star Trek? Live long and prosper. Benediction. No matter what, whether it's a sales call, whether it's a coaching conversation, or it's just simply a conversation and a discussion with friends, affirmation, attention, concentration, direction, benediction. You speak well to another. One of my mentors said this to me. He said, Stan, in every conversation you have, every human transaction, you either bless or you curse. There's no neutrality. They are either better off because you were in their life, or they're not. Do everything you can to make their life better, because all of you are now that many minutes or that many hours closer to being dead. So make sure you close with a benediction. There we go. Affirmation, attention, concentration, direction, benediction. Now go and do it. Next episode in our little 50 minutes of therapy will be coming up next. Thank you for your time. Thank you so much for blessing me by listening. I'm grateful for your attention. Thank you for your time. I'm grateful. I'm very grateful that you're seen fit to perhaps maybe even finish the course, finish the class, and perhaps then take some actions. I truly believe that some of this material is life-changing. It certainly will help you be a better salesperson. It'll certainly help you be a better marketer. It may help you even be a better parent. But more than that, the class is designed to help you as a successful man or woman to become more successful and then be able to pass on some of your wisdom and insight and truth. That is what it takes. Wit. Also, a sense of humor. Wit is what it takes to be successful in life and business today. A man or woman who cannot smile, who cannot laugh, will never be truly successful, and they will never be a good coach and mentor. But more than that, wit also stands for wisdom, insight, and truth. We're kind of modeling in our conversations the TED Talks, which are about 20 minutes. And it was technology, entertainment, and design. And that's what it was about. Well, we are a little different. We're about wisdom, insight, and truth. Now, with that in mind, what I'd like to do is kind of put on my reading glasses for a moment, if I might, because my other glasses don't work quite that well. And what I would like to do is to read for you something from my book entitled Upside Down, a Meditation and a Benediction. Let me quote these things to you. Many are familiar with the well-known prayer attributed to the great theologian Reinhold Niebuhr and often used by the good folks in AA. Give me the power to change what I can, the courage to accept what I cannot, and the wisdom to know the difference. Yes, wisdom. Ultimately, the goal of mentoring and coaching, indeed teaching, is to create a worldwide web of powerful men and women who walk with wisdom. WWW. They walk with wisdom. A later writer, Eugene Peterson, wrote this about wisdom. Wisdom has to do with becoming skillful in honoring our parents and raising our children, handling our money and conducting our sexual lives, going to work and exercising leadership, using words well and treating friends kindly, eating and drinking healthily, cultivating emotions within ourselves and attitudes towards others that make for peace. Right now, the business world does not need any more MBAs. We don't need more Masters of Business Administration. As I oftentimes say, the problem with having an MBA, you actually might think you are one, a Master of Business Administration. It needs people who seek to be wise, to be world-class in their business practices, and ethical and strong in their leadership and service to colleagues and customers. My challenge to you is that you be that kind of person and help others be that way too. That's why when it comes to mentoring, I believe it is all upside and no real downside. It's really important to me, that in effect, that when people carry me out, and I oftentimes say that one of the best ways that you can begin a mentoring relationship is actually to do what Peter Drucker did for many, many years, particularly in the later years of his coaching and mentoring practice. Toward the end, he obviously was the management consultant par excellence. But later in his life, he came to a rather unique practice. He took something from the words of St. Augustine, who had said that one of the classic questions is very simply this: how do you want to be remembered? How do you want to be remembered? And he said, what I discovered is that a man or a woman in leadership who could not answer that question, I probably couldn't really help them. Somehow they had to decide in their life and in their business position, when I'm no longer there, how do my colleagues, how do my customers, how do the people remember me? You know, that proverbial, what do you want people to say on your tombstone? What do you want your children to say at your memorial service? How do you want people to remember you? And perhaps it could be that the really good mentor is the man or woman who's wise enough to ask the question and seek to answer it, how do I want to be remembered? And they hopefully teach and tell others that, and then hopefully they'll be held accountable or responsible to live up to it, and they can then have the privilege and perhaps the honor of doing the same thing for others. That there truly is a worldwide web of men and women who walk with wisdom. And that's what the world needs now. It doesn't need more education. It doesn't need more knowledge. It needs more men and women of wisdom. Of all the knowledge and information we ever need, and more so. One of my colleagues pointed out, he said, I think it was, I don't know if it was Picasso or not, but so don't quote me on this. But he simply said this: computers are basically useless because all they do is give us answers. All they can do is give us answers. And that may not be what we need. We may need the questions. We may need the wisdom. And we may need to go through both the love and suffering that requires in answering those questions and then living them out. So here's my challenge to you. Now, I want you to understand the word I just used. Oftentimes when I'm mentoring other people, the way I do directions, and I said this is part of a longer class, is I go through these steps. The easiest thing to say to a person is, with your permission, may I make an observation? It's not a judgment, it's not even a criticism, it's just an observation. It seemed to me that you were a bit nervous at that presentation. Could you respond? An observation might be helpful. The next, gearing it up a little bit, is to go from an observation to say, with your permission, or would you allow me to make a suggestion? No. Maybe it would be helpful if you would do this. Observation, suggestion. Now the next step is perhaps to be a little bolder and a little more directive and make a recommendation. If I were you, Deb, I would do this. I would really strongly recommend that you take this action. That's good. And of course, they always have the right, the permission. They know this to say no. Remember, we're coaching. We're not managing. Okay, we're mentoring. We're not moving them. We are allowing them the freedom to make good, responsible choices based on the relationship and the information and the knowledge and wisdom that we share. So we go from an observation to a suggestion to a recommendation to a challenge. And I've done this quite often in my coaching career. We've come to a certain decision about something that needs to be done. And I'll look them straight in the eye, maybe take off my glasses or put on my glasses, whatever is best for the show at that moment, and say, I would like to issue you a challenge. I want you to get that book written in 6 months. I challenge you. And then I simply say, will you accept the challenge? They can say yes, they can say no, or they can say they think about it, but what I've done is I put it back to them. And those kinds of ways of working. Now, I would encourage you to take this seriously. These steps of observing, recommending, and suggesting and challenging, about knowing that we're about doing wisdom. And then I would really encourage you to have what I would call your own wisdom path. Who are you studying? Who is teaching you? Who is coaching or mentoring you? What is helping you become wiser, more insightful, more in line with the truth and the reality of the way the world works? What is your wisdom path? And part of good mentoring and coaching and actually being a good advisor to other people is that you have a wisdom path and you're seeing whether they have one, and if there's any meeting of it. I remember, as I said, one of my good clients, a very successful man in the financial services, and we had talked about the power of wisdom and beliefs, and then he all of a sudden he leaned back and he said, you know what, Stan, it's clear to me now. You know what clients really give me trouble? Are the people whose wisdom, values, and beliefs we don't share. It's all about the business, it's all about the money, and those are the people who cause me the most grief. And probably I'm uncomfortable in the grief to them too. Isn't it nice to have those people who were sharing real wisdom, insight, and truth together? So my suggestion to you is, if you're going to be a mentor, a coach, a teacher to others, you are seeking a way to become wiser in the things that are important to you, and particularly in your life, and particularly in the business and industry you're at. I oftentimes say this is, what if they brought together the top 100 people in your industry and they asked you to take 10 minutes and tell them what was important and what they should do? What would you tell them? What would you say to them? What would be your coaching and your counsel and your mentoring to the men and women in your industry about the future and the things they need to do and the places they need to go and the people they need to cherish and the people they need to coach and bring up and help the next generation be successful. You see, we are only one generation at a time from the jungle. It is only as the values of one generation are passed on to the next that those things that make civilization, I'm old school, worthwhile and make it work. And you have a moral, spiritual, and ethical responsibility to be successful as best as you can and to be ethical. But you have a responsibility to take what has been given to you and what has been given to us from the ages, what has been given to us from spiritual realities from heaven above, and we are to pass it on to those who are younger and aspiring and engaging and will be the next generation. That's my challenge to you. Will you accept that challenge? Will you learn how to be a coach, a teacher, or a mentor to a young man or woman who you admire, who has a sense of aspiration, and they would like to be kind of like you? That's my challenge. Will you accept that challenge? Well, at least thank you for thinking about it. And we'll close with a benediction in just a few minutes. Hi. Well, thank you. You hung on all the way to the end. Thank you. You're very kind to do that. And I'd love to hear from you. Again, my name is Stan. What It Takes is who I'm about. You can check me out on a variety of sources. You can Google Stan Hustad, and I think I'm the only one in the world, because if you Google Stan Hustad, I think I come up #1. So you'll find out more about me. If you want to contact me, it's stan@stanhustad.com, stan@stanhustad.com. And I think I have a website perhaps called www.stanhustad.com. And you'll find a variety of my stuff around. I got paid a little bit for doing this, and you know why? It's because I deserve it. That's right, I do. I deserve it. I brought value to you, and hopefully in bringing value to you, you will compensate me in some way. And that is traditionally what the good business model is all about, is value bequeaths value, which bequeaths value. If you'd like me to get more engaged with you and your company and your organization, I'd love to do so. Again, I challenge you to take this seriously and decide what you're going to do. Please contact me, stan@stanhustad.com, stan@stanhustad.com. Whatever you decide, I wish you all the best. May it go well for you. May your life and your business prosper. May you walk with wisdom. And may you find that there is deep peace in your world, and perhaps literally in the world, because of you. Bye for now.